Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and Kenny Squared. This is Sports on the Positive Tip, where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. So much to talk about today is going to center mostly around Tom Thibodeau getting fired by the Knicks. But Kenny, I'm going to go to baseball for our opening here. I have a question I've been meaning to ask you for a while. So the Mets have the best record in baseball from this time last year to this time this year, like 101 and 61, I think it is. This is where they took off. They took two out of three from the Phillies in that London series. They brought up Iglesias and put Lindor in the leadoff spot, and they took off. Now, Aaron Boone is a very good manager who I don't think gets as much credit as he should. But I wonder, though, do you ever think that one got away with one Carlos Mendoza and how well he is doing with the Mets? The Mets are 39 and 23 now, owning the best record in the National League. The Tigers have the best record in the majors. Do you ever think that, hey, maybe I would have rather had Mendoza instead of Aaron Boone? Because you've been down on Aaron Boone several times over the last years.
Yeah, I think that um I think Mendoza had a bigger impact than we realize. Um we could also I propose a trade? Take back Luis Rojas.
No. Now he's still your third base coach, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So so you would rather have Boone than Mendoza.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think sometimes Boone I think is a very player-friendly manager, which kind of makes sense because like he replaced Joe Girardi, who's definitely tough on players, which we'll talk a little bit more about coaching styles in a little bit. Um, But I think sometimes his biggest thing is like he's too much of a player's manager where he'll kind of let things slide that probably shouldn't slide. A la like Gleyber Torres refusing to play third base last year
Yeah.
when they got Jazz. Like refusing to change the lineup up when DJ LeMahieu was batting leadoff and batting like 100.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think Mendoza is probably a good combination of like a player's manager, but also he's not just gonna let people do whatever they want.
Yeah. Yeah. He's turned out to be an excellent, excellent manager, you know. And but I like Boone. I've always thought Boone has done a really good job, especially replacing Girardi. And I want to bring up Girardi when we talk about Thibodeau as well. We always talk about, and we don't make fun of this, but players that seem to get old quick in baseball. I've got two for you. Very quietly, the Angels DFA Tim Anderson. And
Ooh,
boy, watching, the Mets are coming on at 10 o'clock these last three nights, and I won't even get to see the game this afternoon either because of this conference that I'll be at. But so I've only seen like the first two or three innings these last few nights. But Michael Conforto, I'll throw into there also. He's batting 169 with I think three homers, nine RBIs. He looks lost at the plate, and he actually looks a little clunky in the field. Thoughts on Conforto and Anderson today? Because neither one of those guys are old. What are your thoughts on both those guys?
Tim Anderson, you look at his numbers since Jose Ramirez punched him in the face, and it's remarkably different.
Yeah.
Uh, Basically, Jose Ramirez knocked Tim Anderson out of baseball. Um, I think with Conforto, he lost that 1 year. Wasn't it? It wasn't just injury, right? Didn't he also like basically sit out a year to
No,
like
he had the shoulder injury, so he lost most of that year. Yeah, and but he started late in his free agency with the Giants. Remember, they didn't sign him until somewhere after the season started, if I remember right. I could be off there. I don't think he sat out a year. I think he missed most of the year with the shoulder injury, if not the full year. He might have missed a full year if I remember right.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of surprising because especially coming up with the Mets, you thought he was going to be like the
Yeah,
next,
yeah,
not like a superstar, but like a pretty reliable guy that'll go 15, 18 years in Major League Baseball. But I don't know if
yeah.
that's going to happen.
No, no, he had 33 homers if I remember right in 2019. and he was an All-Star in 2017. So, and he came up and he did great when they beat the Dodgers in the division series in 2015. So all of a sudden he's been around 10 years, but he's still pretty young. It's a shame to see that. All right, it's all about Tom Thibodeau for probably the next half hour at least of our show. You ready to get this going?
Let's get into it.
All right. This episode of Sports on the Positive Tip is brought to you by the Tavern Coffee House. Attention, coffee lovers! Are you craving the perfect cup of coffee to start your day? Well, look no further than the Tavern Coffee House. It's located at 12302 Buckeye Road in Cleveland, Ohio. You can also check them out and order your coffee at thetaverncoffee.com. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. Kenny, I think the Knicks just can't stand prosperity. They couldn't let us fans just enjoy this wonderful run that they had this year. Of course, we were all disappointed they didn't win two more games to get to the finals and taking our chance against just a formidable OKC team. We'll preview that in a few. But the word comes, and I think we were just as shocked. It's funny, the NBA, I'm thinking of three specific things in the last several months that really got us. It was right before the season started. We looked down at our phone and we see that the Knicks that the Knicks have made the trade for Karl Anthony Towns, and we're stunned, we're like, all right, let's go, and then we look at our phones on a random Saturday night and we see that Luka Doncic is traded from Dallas to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, and we're like, what? I was even more stunned when I looked out at the phone the other day and I see the Knicks are letting Tom Thibodeau go. I didn't know what to make of it. I still don't, because the Knicks from Leon Rose on up, they don't talk in front of the media. They don't do a press conference and answer questions. They just put out a statement, which didn't make much sense to me. I was shocked, and now over that shock, a couple of days later, I'm still perplexed as to why they would do this at this time. Do they have a hot candidate in mind? I think the only conclusion that I'm drawing, and I think you're drawing kind of the same one, is that they feel that Thibodeau cannot take them to that next level, which is taking the next step to get to the finals, and then you take your chances from there. Anxious to hear your thoughts now. A couple of days later, you were very upset a couple of days ago when this first came out. As now the dust has settled, what are you thinking and feeling?
Well, let me start out with this. Being an NBA coach might be more brutal than an NFL coach.
Or
Um,
NHL, even it's hockey,
yeah,
man. I thought they fired people quickly in hockey, but my goodness.
just to kind of put it in perspective here. Um, let's not include this year because it doesn't count. Because like that would be weird, although it has happened before. Six of the last seven coaches of the year have been fired by their team. Um, the only one that hasn't is Kenny Atkinson of the Cavs, who won it in 2024. So it is brutal. Also, when you look at it, Thibodeau has been the best coach the Knicks have had in 25 years. I don't think there's any debating that. Like
Yep.
Mike Woodson had one good year. D'Antoni maybe had a good stretch. But like, I mean, we went over that last week. I don't know if we said it on the air or like via text, but like the Knicks had a carousel of characters at the coaching position. Whether you're talking Derek Fisher fighting was it
Uh,
Harrison Barnes?
Matt
Oh,
Barnes. Yeah,
Matt
Matt Barnes.
Barnes.
Yeah.
Um, or Jeff Hornacek, or the bad year of Larry Brown, or
Oh,
David Fizdale,
oh,
or Isaiah Thomas, both as a GM and a head coach. Like the Knicks have gone through a lot of really bad head coaches, and we finally found one that works well, that fits the system, that fits the team. And he had the best year of any coach in the last 25 years. 2 wins away from the finals. And you decide to let him go. Now, if I'm Leon Rose, I wouldn't have done it. However, I think there is a few reasons why. Okay, so I don't know if you knew this. Throughout the playoffs, the Knicks were trailing by double figures in every game except for game six against the Celtics.
Hmm.
So they always had to come back. There was
Yep.
always fighting that deficit. There were times they had lineups in the playoffs that never played together in the regular season
Yeah.
because it kind of felt like after game two or so, Thibodeau was just like, forget it. Let's just throw out whoever.
Right.
Shamit gets some playing time. DeLon Wright, go for it. And like maybe you should have done that earlier so these guys could have had a little bit more cohesion. Also, in the playoffs, defensive rating, the Knicks ranked eighth out of the 16 teams that played.
Hmm.
They're supposed to be known for their defense, and at times their defense was not good. Part of that, I think, is a product of their personnel. Because when you look at their starting five of Brunson, Bridges, Hart slash Robinson, Carl Anthony Towns, and OG, only three of those guys are really more defensive minded. Jalen Brunson's not, and Carl Anthony Towns is not.
Right.
And to some extent, like that is a personnel thing, that is a how you're structuring the team thing. And therefore, Leon Rose should kind of be looking himself in the mirror.
Well, yeah.
Um,
Is that we'll talk about that. Yeah.
but I think there's a few things. Like first, like I think the defense and how they were. I think like the defense in the playoffs probably was like, well, it should be better than this. Um, Now I feel like I'm kind of going in a bunch of different directions. I think another thing too. This is probably something that's been more in the works than the last few days. Because you can't fire him based on his playoff performance. He had the best playoff performance of anyone.
Right.
Carmelo Anthony never got to an Eastern Conference Finals.
Right.
Amari Stoudemire never did. None of these guys got to where they got to. And so I think kind of like what you said before. I feel like maybe they feel like they've kind of hit their ceiling with Thibodeau, which is kind of unfortunate. But the Knicks are playing a very risky game because, well, I'll just ask you before Phil Jackson, you know who the coach was of the Bulls?
I think Doug Collins. Was it Doug Collins?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you say he was a pretty good head coach?
He was good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Obviously, you'll know this one, Golden State Warriors. Who was the head coach before Steve Kerr?
Yeah. Mark Jackson.
Mark Jackson. He's a good head coach.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think maybe the Knicks are looking at that and they're like, well, it's been a pattern. And maybe like Tibbs is good, but he's not the guy that can take us to the next level. However, like this could go one of two ways. We can look back in like 2027 and 2028 and say, man, 2025 was the best year that we've had in a long time. Or we could be looking 2027 and 2028 and saying, like, wow, the Knicks finally won a championship.
Hmm.
It's just a very risky game. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll kind of turn it over to you. I have to find it real quick. This is the stat that kind of scares me the most. Final season with Tom Thibodeau, because now he's been fired three times. He was 50 and 32 with the Bulls. Their first season after he got fired from Chicago, they were 42 and 40. And then the next season, 41 and 41.
They've been mediocre since the
Yeah, and
Bulls.
they've been
Yeah.
mediocre since.
Yeah.
Minnesota, 47 and 35. And then they went to 36 and 46. And then the next year, 19 and 45.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, I think that there's other underlying things like obviously with the Bulls, Derrick Rose was never the same.
Right. Yeah.
And Minnesota, like some personnel change, some trading happened and everything like that. But it is concerning. We could be like looking in 2 years and saying, wow, what a great and smart move by Leon Rose, which he's made a lot of good ones.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
we could be looking back and saying, okay, yeah, we peaked in 2025.
Yeah. Um, you hit on some great, great points. I think that I think here's as I digested their playoff run, Ken, and I don't know that you lay this at the foot of Thibodeau. I want to go back for a second though to the regular season and compare it to the playoff run. There were times in the regular season where this team looked formidable. They looked awesome. And most of those times wasn't just when Jalen Brunson was on his game. Most of those times was when they were moving the ball around. And there were times where their offense looked so fluid. There were times where their defense looked great. Now, listen, through the whole year, and I want to say even 2 years, Thibodeau has played his starters a lot. And, it was only Mikal Bridges that asked him about that, that he wanted to for the long run. Now, Mikal Bridges plays every day. Got to give him a lot of credit. He hasn't missed a game since he's been in the NBA. I think since high school, he hasn't missed a game. But if you look at the playoff run, particularly this series with Indiana, there were times where the offense looked so stagnant and where Towns had no idea what to do. And we thought at the beginning of the Indiana series that this was a terrible matchup for Indiana with Towns. They really had nobody to guard him. So they all flooded the lane. And how many times did Towns go in and it was a charging, or he would just go in and try to bully his way to the basket. So there was something that changed in their game, and we saw glimpses of that throughout the playoffs. There were a few games with Detroit. I thought that they played almost their perfect offensive game, and that last game with the Celtics when they closed it out, I thought was typical of what we saw a lot in the regular season. But in the playoffs with Indiana, we didn't see that. And listen, I want to give Indiana a lot of credit because they probably matched up really well. And I said this before he got let go. Rick Carlisle certainly outcoached Thibodeau because you're right. Once you got to game 3 and game 4, he just started putting guys out there with no rhyme or reason. Whereas that, DeLon Wright, in the little bit of time he played in the regular season, you clearly saw he's a superior defensive player. Offensively, he's okay, right? But Shabbat is lightning off the bench. We saw that a few times in the regular season. And, we were wondering why he kept sticking with Cam Payne. Now, Payne had the playoff experience, so I was a little surprised, and he did great in the Detroit series. So I was a little surprised that he fell off the way he did, and he had an okay regular season. Anyway, here's the other thing. So that stood out for me. The other thing that stood out for me was, Kenny, do you remember at all? And I know you don't, because right there in the middle of the season, you had this thing where, you had twins or your wife had twins. So I know there was a lot of games that you just couldn't see, there you were just busy or you would catch up on some sleep, whatever. But I watch most games in the regular season. I'm sure I missed several here and there, but I never saw this team bicker the way they started bickering as the playoffs unfolded, particularly in this Indiana series. And to see Josh Hart yelling at Thibodeau, I mean, Thibodeau is such an intimidating figure at times. I never saw any players go back at him. Something was going on. So, because Leon Rose, this is so frustrating. Scott Perry did the same thing. And maybe this comes from Dolan. And I'm going to tell you, I listened to Mike Francesa the other day. I'll tell you what he said in a second. But about Dolan, it's so frustrating because you just don't know. He doesn't get in front of, he hasn't done, he hasn't done one press conference aside from his opening press conference in 2020. So he's gone 5 years where he hasn't done one, not one, press conference. And you can make a case the GM doesn't need to, the team president doesn't need to. I mean, Thibodeau does talk. But still, a situation like this, you'd like to see him get before the cameras and say, here was my thought process. And you don't have to reveal the private stuff behind the scenes. Maybe something was going on in the locker room. I started to feel that way before he got fired, that, hey, this team was a little bit different in this series. They were a little bit more panicked. They were a little bit, let's just give the ball to Brunson. And then there were games where we were texting, hey, why doesn't Brunson have the ball? Why is Mikal Bridges continuing to shoot and he keeps missing? So I think that the Knicks thinking is just that they just feel like this is as far as Thibodeau's going to take them. He hasn't taken a team to the finals yet. Um, his best shot, I guess that was 2011, right? Or 2012 with the Derrick Rose led Bulls that got to the conference finals, lost to the Celtics. Um, but I didn't think he had a great team in Minnesota. He had Towns there. I thought that team overachieved with him. And did this Knick team overachieve? Well, they two back-to-back 50-win years. They haven't done that since 95 and 96 with Pat Riley. So, you know, I think that you don't want to wait till you go into the regular season. So I do understand that. You know, make a few moves, see how this team fits. You don't want to go 20 games in and then change coaches, I guess. Not when you're looking to go to a championship. So I guess if they didn't have that confidence in them, it's the right move. But it's it's hard to imagine that you could go that far. And a couple of quick examples. You mentioned Mark Jackson, Steve Kerr, and you go to Kerr and you win all these titles. Um, I look back at a couple of other in baseball, and I look right at your Yankees because I think they've done that twice. Because it had to take a lot to let Joe Torre go. It had to take, actually, I think they've done it three times. Buck Showalter, got them back to the playoffs. The Yankees they missed the playoffs all but 1 year in the 80s. And then they were terrible at the early 90s. They had Stump Merrill and Dallas Green. And then they bring in Buck Showalter, who nobody knew. He was their minor league manager. And he did a great job. And him and Gene Michael get the Yankees back on track. They get to the playoffs in '95, but I think that Steinbrenner felt like this is as far as we're going to go with Showalter. And it was such an interesting hire because Joe Torre, while he was a veteran manager and a great player, he didn't have much success as a manager with the Mets, the Braves, or the Cardinals. He made the playoffs one time with the Braves, right? And so, but look how it turned out. Torre was the perfect guy, as it turned out. Um, and then you have Joe Girardi, who wins a title in 2009, gets them to the playoffs pretty much every year. I know they missed it a couple of times, but it wasn't like they were doing bad under him. But and again, Brian Cashman, because he talks to the media, said he felt like they just needed a different voice, and this was as far as Girardi was going to take them, and now you have Aaron Boone there. So it's been done, and I'm sure we could probably cite other teams and other sports and everything like that. But it's risky, man. It is really risky, and you laid it out beautifully because we could be looking at this 2 years from now and saying, "What happened?" You know, what the heck happened? We are expecting them to at least make some moves, right, to fortify the bench. That's what you and I talked about, I think, right after. And they need that. And I was even throwing names at you like a Miles Turner or someone like that, to come off the bench and to really, give some firepower and some defensive presence. They don't have much money available. So they're going to have to take a veteran who wants to come to New York, right, and play for the Knicks. Uh, and we talked about all the draft choices, draft picks, and they hoarded those for years. And then they've now sent all those out between the Mikal Bridges trade and the Karl Anthony Towns trade. I think this is a good starting five, an excellent starting five that can get to the finals, especially next year. You're missing a Jason Tatum now in Boston, right? And of course, we have to see how things shake out. If one of these teams gets Giannis and takes him to another level, but so now we move forward, and I want to throw some names at you here.
Um,
I personally think. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, please.
two quick things.
Yeah.
So you'd kind of just said it. The East is wide open next year.
Yeah.
Um, Cleveland, I know they won 64 games, but there's a good chance that they might get into the whole second apron thing and might have to trade a couple of players. Um, Obviously, Giannis is going to be like the centerpiece of the offseason as to who gets him. And then you got the Celtics who won't have Tatum, and they also might be looking at, oh gosh, we don't have our superstar. We are probably going to be above the second apron in luxury tax. So we might have to trade a Jalen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, Derek White, one of those
Yeah.
guys to kind of alleviate some money, especially since they've got new ownership.
Yeah.
So like the East is wide open. This can be a move where the Knicks kind of take that spot and they hold it and then they secure it.
Yep. Yeah.
Or it could be like they're just kind of another one of the East teams. Second thing, um, and obviously this is just speculation. Maybe they have a maybe they have some type of knowledge that if they hire a certain coach, Giannis would want to just come there and nowhere else.
Yep. Yeah.
Like supposedly he's close with Jason Kidd. I don't know why Jason Kidd wouldn't. Well, actually, maybe I do know why Jason Kidd would want to leave the Mavericks, but um, yeah, I don't know.
Well, yeah, from his days as coach of the Bucks, when Giannis first came into the league. Well, let's talk about some names because I personally think that they have this to me seemed like too much of a coincidence, and all signs have pointed to Phoenix hiring Johnny Bryant, and then they didn't. They hired the other guy, Jordan Ott, who I never heard of, but that's not unusual, right, for the assistant coaches. But Johnny Bryant, we knew very well. He's um, very much. You could tell he was Thibodeau's, right hand guy while he was here. And then he goes to Cleveland and look what they do. So he's highly thought of. But let's put his name to the side for a second. That's just my opinion. The names of coaches that are under contract are popping up now, right? Like Ime Udoka, Jason Kidd, you mentioned, and Eric Spoelstra. Is there any shot that any one of those three guys would come to the Knicks? It would have to be they'd have to quit and then have to take their chances and come to the Knicks. And I'm thinking, aside from Jason Kidd, like why would Udoka or his Spoelstra? Because I think Miami's going to do a full rebuild. Would Spoelstra want to be around for that? I don't know. But would Pat Riley help the Knicks out? Of course not. He still can't stand the Knicks. So how about those three guys? Any shots? What are your thoughts?
Give it like a 1% shot. You never
1%.
want to say
Okay.
never.
Yeah.
But like I thought I'd read that there's a chance that even if the Knicks asked for an interview, the Rockets wouldn't let Udoka interview.
I wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
Maybe Jason Kidd because like you had mentioned the Giannis connection. There's also a Jalen Brunson connection too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also like he kind of runs things there. And I know he lost his generational talent in Luka Doncic, but still. And I don't know why Spoelstra would want to leave Miami. Um, he's a legend there.
Yeah.
He's like, especially in like the last 20 plus years, top three coach.
Yeah.
Like him,
Yeah.
Popovich, like there aren't that many names. So I don't know why he would want to leave. Unless
Right.
he's like, oh, I can really become like the like if he's the guy that leads the Knicks to a title,
Yeah.
all bets are off. But also,
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
see Pat Riley even letting that happen.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to I'll come back to college in a second, but let's go to the NBA coaches that are available now. And there's three that have won championships. We'll start with Mark Jackson first, who hasn't, but Mark Jackson has gotten turned down for a lot of roles in the past. Any shot on Mark Jackson? I mean, now the fans would love bringing in legendary Knick player. I don't see it happening, but what are your thoughts on Mark Jackson?
I agree. I don't see it happening. I think it would be a fun name,
Yeah,
but also you kind of wonder, like, is Mark Jackson kind of like Thibodeau, and can he
maybe.
actually take them to the next level?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, that's the other factor, right? Whoever it is that brings in, the expectations is to get at least to the conference finals, but to the finals. And that's hard in year one for any coach. You could have, Red Auerbach or Red Holzman, and it's hard for any coach. All right. The list of championship coaches that are available start to me, in my opinion, start and end with Michael Malone from the Nuggets, Frank Vogel, or Mike Budenholzer. Your thoughts there?
Um, Budenholzer would be interesting just because of the Giannis connection, but none of those guys to me are like marginally better than Thibodeau.
Hmm.
I feel like they're kind of all the same. I think Mike Malone might be a slightly step up, but like I heard this a few times and it kind of makes sense. Like looking at the Jets, we might talk about the Jets later. Like you kind of when you're looking at a new head coach, usually you're kind of going from either from like a player friendly coach to a guy that's tough on players coach or vice versa. And like Mike Malone is very similar to Thibodeau in that he is pretty hard on players, which is part of the reason why he got fired from Denver.
Yeah.
So I think that it would kind of still be a good move because he is still a good head coach, but I think they're looking for kind of a new style.
That's a great point. Yep. And there's a reason why. Remember, I sent you that article that they really dug into why he was fired with just 3 days, 3 games left in the season, and it was because of this nasty feud that he had with the GM. And but there were also some player issues as well. So Malone, he might, and again, he might be exactly like Thibodeau is, except with the exception is that he had Jokic and he's won a championship, and I'm not saying that that shouldn't be a great accomplishment for him. It certainly is, but I think you're right. I think they're going to look to go into a different direction. So your thoughts? Let's go to two college names, and I've done this kind of on purpose where we land to the one name that I think we could discuss a little bit more. But one I think there's no shot, and that's Danny Hurley. Your thoughts on him?
That's a
Local
UConn
guy,
guy, right?
huh?
That's UConn, right?
From UConn, yeah. Two
Yeah.
championships, got them into the tournament last year. Um, Local guy, New Jersey, I believe, is where the Hurleys kind of hail from. Um, Flirted with the Lakers. We thought he was going to go to the Lakers last year. Didn't fell through. Your thoughts on him?
He's come out and said no. Um,
Okay.
he said I'm not going that again next this
Yeah,
year.
he's not going through the rumors. Okay. All right. So now we center around Jay Wright, who I think is a wonderful coach. Followed his career. He coached the high school team out here on Long Island first, and then Hofstra, and then just had this wonderful, wonderful run at Villanova. Stepped aside, still relatively young. I think he's in his early 60s, but he looks a lot younger than that. Um, and but he loves television. So I want to go back real quick. I'll throw this in. I listened to Mike Francesa's podcast after the firing. He came on almost right after, and he said he has it on sources that number one that and I think he might know this, right? That James Dolan had nothing to do with Thibodeau's firing, and Dolan really liked him, and Dolan had vowed years back to step aside and let Leon Rose run it. And the reason why he said that he didn't pick up the phone and tell Leon Rose to fire him is because if Leon Rose didn't want to fire him, he would probably just quit because Leon Rose doesn't need the money. So think about, you remember, it seems like a long time ago now, Leon Rose was like the top agent in the NBA, sort of like the Scott Boras. So let's just say Scott Boras became, and we had that with Van Wagenen, right, with the Mets, but Van Wagenen wasn't as popular as or have as much money as Boras. Let's say Scott Boras became GM of the Yankees tomorrow, and he's going to run it the way he's going to run it. Otherwise, he's just going to leave. And so he said, Leon Rose told him that, listen, I'm doing this because I like you. I don't need the money. You know what I mean? So he says that this wasn't a Dolan move. And then the other insight he has is that Jay Wright really looks forward to at one point being the number one analyst at CBS or for college basketball. That he loves his life now. He loves TV, and he's gonna take his time. I mean, they've got a pretty good team there, but with Ian Eagle and Grant Hill and Bill Rafferty. But Bill Rafferty's got to be up there in age. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's got to be in his 70s, mid 70s, late 70s. So he might have his eye on that when Rafferty at some point steps aside. But Jay Wright makes perfect sense in a couple of ways, right? I think he would translate into the pros as a college coach. And of course, the obvious one is he's got the Villanova connection with Brunson, Hart, and Bridges. So it comes to him. What are your thoughts with Jay Wright?
The Knicks win a title with like as Villanova Knicks as they can get. That would be amazing. Like bring back Dante DiVincenzo. Hire the Pope as a special advisor. Just go like I think though it what would work is the chemistry there. Um, Obviously Jay Wright has played with three of the starters on this team. And I think he already knows how they work, and now he can kind of help develop them to the next level. I know in general, like college and pros, like it usually doesn't work, but we do have examples of it.
Yeah.
Who's the dude from Boston? Their GM now,
Yeah, Brad Stevens,
Brad Stevens.
Billy Donovan.
Yeah, Billy Donovan's been good. Like, so I think it could work. But I kind of agree with you that I think he really, really likes broadcasting.
Yeah.
I did see like he was on like a podcast interview and someone asked him like, "Would you want to coach an NBA team?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, I'd coach the Knicks." But I don't know how long ago it was.
Yeah.
I think he really likes broadcasting, but I think if any job would pull him back to a head coaching position, it would be this one.
Oh,
Because not
yeah.
only can he play in New York, but he would be coaching all of the guys that helped him win a title.
Yeah.
So I,
Yeah.
I I'd at least I would be okay with him being there. I think there are three guys that I'm like, okay, I can kind of see what you're doing, and I'm excited about it. I think Jay Wright would be one. I think Johnny Bryant would be another because like one of the issues that, and I heard someone say this, I think it was Chris Broussard maybe. One of the issues with the Knicks is they don't pass the ball a lot.
Yeah.
And Johnny Bryant has now been in the Cavs system for a couple of years where they move the ball around a lot. Like seeing them in person a couple times this year, that Cavs offense is just like you're moving the ball left and right and someone's hitting a three.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think the Knicks need a little bit more of that because, like, yes, Brunson is a great leader for this team, but you can kind of tell if Mikal Bridges isn't in the game early enough, if OG isn't hitting his shots, then they're just kind of gone.
Yeah.
Heck, even Karl Anthony Towns, a lot of times, if he's not engaged in the offense early, he doesn't get into it. And
Yeah.
I think like trying to get a little bit more ball movement, even if it means that instead of 25, 26 points a game, Jalen Brunson's at 20, I think it'll help. So I think Johnny Bryant would also be a good spot. And also Mike Malone. I think if it's not one of those three guys, I'm going to be a little bit more concerned as to why they did this.
So those are your three. Who do you have in what order? Is it Jay Wright number one?
Part of me would say yeah, but also I don't think he would do it.
Yeah.
Like, I guess how I would put it is the guy I would want the most would be Jay Wright because I think it'd be really funny to do the Villanova Knicks thing full. The guy I think they'll probably end up getting most likely would be Johnny Bryant. But then I think the guy that probably would help them the most would probably be Mike Malone.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm torn between. See, I think it'll be Johnny Bryant. That's I'm starting to really think that now. I think they'll bring all these guys in for interviews, and I think they'll bring in Frank Vogel and Budenholzer. And one of those guys might surprise you. I mean, they're good NBA coaches, right? I think they'll call up Mike Malone. I think you gotta make a call to Jay Wright, don't you? I mean, I would be
Oh yeah.
disappointed if they say, yeah, we didn't even consider him, or if he says, hey, the Knicks didn't even call me. But I don't think they should chase. Although all three, Adoka, Kidd, Spoelstra, great coaches, I don't think they should waste their time chasing them. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think Houston, Dow, and Kidd, listen, he's getting ready to coach Cooper Flag. He's getting ready to, possibly have the next superstar, and you throw him on that team and you get a healthy Kyrie Irving back, they could make another run. So, but I think Bryant would be the guy that they probably already at least reached out to, especially since he didn't get the Phoenix job. Um, this is gonna be now the Knicks offseason, which I thought would be meh, because I don't have the confidence that they could land. I know you sent something the other day, but I just don't have the confidence that they can land Giannis. I'm not sure. I'm crazy if they wanted to bring Kevin Durant in. I don't think he helps them defensively at all. It didn't work for him here in New York anyway. He's the definition of a brooding superstar, and I love his game. I think he's a first ballot. He can walk right into the Hall of Fame. He's one of the best players of all time. But um, I'm looking for the moves where find a couple of good veterans that will take that minimum. You know who would fit in on this Knicks team now? There's two guys that they've gotten rid of in the past. And they're both, I don't think DiVincenzo is a free agent, but DiVincenzo was one they could have used against Indiana, right? But the other guy, believe it or not, who had a second half that was great, is Quentin Grimes. I think he'd fit in pretty well in his team because
Uh,
he's a defensive guy and he's a free agent. So he'd be a guy that I would consider bringing back. But all right, a lot on the Knicks here. I think, and rightly so. I think we spent most of the time on the Knicks. We'll see how this unfolds over these next couple of weeks. I hope they get a coach sooner rather than later before the draft. Go ahead, Ken. Yep, sorry.
all right, this is related adjacent. So there are six, this is trivia here. I looked it up here. There are six um coaches in NBA history that won a title in their first season. How many of them do you think you can name?
Well, I could name the Celtics coach from last year, right?
Yep.
He's one. Uh, I want to say Pat Riley.
Pat Riley,
Yeah.
the 82 Lakers, the Showtime Lakers.
Okay. Okay. Um, I'm hard pressed to name the others
Okay, I'll give you a hint. Three of them are in the last decade.
in the last decade. Maybe Nick Nurse.
Nick Nurse, who then I
Okay.
believe got fired right after that.
This is crazy, isn't it? Um, Frank Vogel.
Frank Vogel is not one of them.
Oh, he's not. Okay. So he was with the Lakers more than that 1 year. Okay. Um, the year before. All right, give me the others.
Um, Ty Lue with the Cavs.
Okay. Okay.
He actually came in midway through the year that year.
Yeah.
Steve Kerr the previous year with the Warriors,
Ah,
2015.
okay.
And then the other one, Paul Westhead of the 1980 Lakers.
Paul West said, yeah, and that was when Magic Johnson, one blip on his career where he got him fired. Oh, 'cause yeah, wow, okay. So it doesn't happen often. The Knicks are going to be looking for, you know,
But it also has happened four times in the last 10 years
okay, all right, okay,
between Missoula, Nurse, Lou, which like Lou and Kerr to me is a little bit of the outliers, but the other two like well, even Nick Nurse though, 2019, like you got Kawhi Leonard, and then also all of the Warriors got hurt. So
yeah, yeah, I remember that. With Kevin Durant, starting with him, right? And then Klay Thompson, yeah, yeah, gosh. Um, let's stay with basketball. We'll spend a second or two here and I only say that because this Thibodeau thing really overshadows the finals start tonight, and it's
who
Pacers
cares?
OKC. OKC is the smallest market in the NBA, and Indianapolis is not exactly a huge market either. And you said OKC sweep. Are you standing by that? You said that a few days ago.
Yeah, OKC is on the verge of having one of the best individual seasons ever. Um, SGA, if he wins Finals MVP, like assuming they win and he wins Finals MVP, would become the fourth point or the fourth guard ever to win the title, win MVP, and win Finals MVP in the same year.
Yeah.
As
Wow.
far as the small market thing goes, I'll say two things. First, this is the NBA's version of the 2023 World Series between Texas and Arizona. But also, the commissioner was on Adam Silver. He was on one of these talk shows and was kind of talking about it. And he said, like, yeah, we don't mind it. Like, it's still going to be good. It's still going to be competitive. And most importantly, you look at, say, the NFL. If the Steelers and Packers played in the Super Bowl, people wouldn't be like, oh, small markets. But Pittsburgh's a small market and Green Bay is a tiny market.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
I I think I think if this by game three is an intriguing, exciting series that people will start to tune in. I don't think a ton are gonna watch game one, game two, right? I think, the diehard basketball fans will watch. I'm gonna watch whatever I can. uh, I'm intrigued to an extent in this series because OKC, I just think we're in for them for the next like 5 years or so. I'm not saying they'll get to the finals, win a championship next 5 years, but I think next 5 to 7 years, if they play their cards right, they should be in contention every year. This Indiana team really does intrigue me too, and I think that if they hadn't beaten the Knicks the way they did, I would really like them because I like the way they play. They play hard, they're tough. The spotlight doesn't bother them. Halliburton, while he's cocky as anything, boy oh boy, he comes through every time. It's just been an amazing run from him doing that drive against in Game 5 against the Bucks, and then taking out the Cavs the way they did. It's an amazing story, but I just don't think it's going to attract the novice fan. If it was Knicks OKC, then it would have, Knicks Minnesota even would have, but I think that the NBA is in for an uphill battle if this is a short series, which it might be. I'm saying OKC, I think in five, maybe six. I do think Indiana will steal at least one game here, but I can't count them out. And it's because of these guys that got ice water in their veins, like Halliburton and Neesmith and Nembhard and TJ McConnell. Oh my gosh, he hasn't missed a shot yet. And Pascal Siakam, I don't know if you saw the video of Halliburton thinking he was going to win the MVP of the series, and Ernie Johnson says it's Pascal Siakam, So, but he's just a tremendous player. He really is, So, and there's a lot to like about Indiana, because you want to say they have the one superstar with Halliburton. Okay, I don't know that Halliburton rises to the level of a superstar, but he's a darn good player. And Siakam has never been regarded as a superstar. He's an all-star. He's been an all-star like three times, I think. But um, it should be a fun series, I think. But I don't think it's going to go long. I think it'll be 5 games. OKC is just too good. Um, let's shift gears, and I want to spend a few minutes on baseball. But before that, I did want to spend a couple of seconds. I did watch part of Edmonton game one, Edmonton and Florida in the Stanley Cup final. I'm not sure why that changed over the last few years. It's the finals, but the final, I get it. Okay. And Edmonton won last night 4-3. And so I was trying to say this in a text chat. Our resident hockey expert, Larry, uh, likes Florida in six. Connor McDavid is certainly the best player. And if you watch him, man, he's so good. But I think that all the hockey best players, they need that championship, right, to go with them. There's a few that are in of the greats that didn't, but Gretzky, Bobby Orr, Gordie Howe, you name any of these greats, and Sidney Crosby and Ovechkin, all these guys have titles. McDavid doesn't have that yet. He's still relatively young, but he doesn't have that yet. But he says that Larry said that he thinks Florida will win in six. I'm wondering if he changed that after Edmonton steals game one here, but we'll see. But that's the NHL. It's it's fun when they have the matchup. And last year's matchup was crazy with Florida winning the first three, Edmonton winning the next three, thinking they might make some history here, but they didn't. Florida won that last game, so we'll keep an eye and we'll talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup final. As we go along. Let's go to baseball real quick. What's intrigued you now? We're in June, first couple of months under our belt. What's intriguing you about baseball right now? Are there any specific teams or players? What's really caught your eye in these first couple of months as we now start to get really serious about baseball?
well, I'll start with a couple players, because it's funny. I had sent you this. So WAR, which I know is sometimes a kind of a broad stat and it has its controversies and whatnot. Number one in WAR this year is by no surprise Aaron Judge, who has continues to mash the ball, plays an excellent right field. So that's easy. But number two, I gave you there are two guys that were tied for second. Um, and both are very surprising because you would think, like you had said, Shohei Ohtani, a guy that surprised me a little bit, Freddie Freeman,
Oh,
who's leading the NL in batting average.
yeah,
But but two guys that are very interesting. Jeremy Pena, who hit, was like known for his accolades in the as a rookie in 2022, unfortunately. But then also your former boy Pete Crow Armstrong, who has had an excellent start to the year. He'll at this point he'll probably get some MVP votes. I think it'll, especially if he pitches at all this year, it'll probably still be Shohei again. They did a poll of like the writers, and he already leads. Him and Judge, I know, very surprising, both lead. So I'll I'll name a couple of teams that kind of surprised me good and surprised me not as good. I think number one would be the Tigers. Like I thought that
oh,
they would be good.
yeah,
I didn't realize they would be this good. Their pitching is excellent. Their second baseman, this dude named Gleyber Torres, where has he been the last 5 years? Javi Baez also having a renaissance year has been a lot of fun to watch.
yeah,
Hopefully not in October. I hope they get knocked out in the first round.
yeah,
Um, but I think that they've been very surprising. I think also the Cubs. I mean, I mentioned Pete Crow Armstrong. Um, I think this is kind of the year that Craig Counsell is showing that he actually is a really good a really good manager. I think he's been really good. As far as disappointments, can I just say the entire AL East that's not named the Yankees?
yeah.
Like I figure Tampa Bay, Toronto would kind of be like mid 500, but like the Orioles have been awful. Obviously they've already fired their manager and everything
Yeah.
like that. But also the Red Sox. I thought by getting Garrett Crochet and all of their young guys kind of taking a step up, they would be better. But I have a feeling a lot is still stewing with that brooding superstar in Rafi Devers. And I just beg them, please trade him out of the division.
Yeah.
That way Garrett Cole never has to see him.
Yeah.
I would love that. I think in the National League, it's hard to say like, oh, I can't pick on the Rockies. No, I'll pick on the Rockies. The Rockies have been awful.
Yeah.
Um,
Swept the
you
series
know,
though.
yeah, they're the first team to lose 50 games before winning 10 games. But then of course they sweep the Marlins. And now are on their greatest winning streak of the year at 3.
Yeah.
But also like, it's crazy. Like, and I know part of it is just like it's the marketing thing and like you kind of have to do it. They're saying send Rockies to the All-Star game. How?
There's got
It's
to be
gonna
at
be
least
like,
one though.
yeah, but it's like those years where it was like the A's were really
Yeah.
bad and like you had their starter that threw the most innings but still had like a 5.82 ERA. Like that's what it's gonna end up being.
And yeah. Speaking of the A's, they're 3-23 in their last 26 games. They have fallen right off of the map too. There's some bad teams, unfortunately, in baseball. Uh, I I got everybody that you said, except I'm surprised that Tampa Bay now is climbing back up. They're I think 3 or 4 games over 500. Will they chase the Yankees really hard? I don't know, but they have so many obstacles that have been going against them. And first, playing in the ballpark that they're playing in the Yankees ballpark, but they're coming up there. I'm really intrigued. I am intrigued by the Cubs. They have 38 wins at 38-23, I think. And I'm wondering who's going to challenge them in that division because it doesn't look like this is going to be the Brewers' year. But the Cardinals are still playing well. The Orioles are at least on a hot streak. I have to tell you though, the Red Sox, from everything I keep reading with Alex Cora and some of the comments he keeps making and how they've handled this whole Rafael Devers thing, he might be on track to get fired. I wouldn't be stunned, and he's a really good manager, but he keeps he keeps blasting his team, which is never a good recipe. He keeps getting it nicely pressed guy. Yeah, we're not getting any better. I'm like, wow. And I had to watch a video of him saying that because I'm like, okay, maybe they took it out of context when you read it. So I think that that's if they don't turn it around quick there in Boston, that is gonna because you and I know better than a lot of just unless you live in that area how that media can be just as bad if not worse than the New York media. So that's and you know how they feel about their socks, so that's the subject of every talk show. I'm really intrigued, but also shocked that the Braves are 27 and 33. They did a great job to get back to 500, and they've fallen back off. And I think it's their pitching that, which you never would think that with the Braves. But they're not getting the timely hitting from Austin Riley. Um, Acuna came back and was just tearing up the ball, and now he's kind of going back into a slump. I'm surprised that they are 27 and 33. There's plenty of time to turn that around. The Mets showed that last year, but boy, it's going to start to get late early for some of these teams. They're 10 games behind the Mets, believe it or not. The Braves. Um, you mentioned the Orioles and the Tigers. I have that written down. I'm not gonna pile on to the Rockies. I'm gonna give you another team that I'm surprised is hovering 3, 4 games under 500. And it'll be interesting if they do a little fire sale at the trade deadline. That's the Texas Rangers. I am really shocked that they can't score runs, that they're getting good pitching. But the name that I'm intrigued at, if they want to, look at a contender, hint, hint, the Dodgers at the trade deadline, and they want to get from under what was probably a bad contract with Jacob deGrom. Imagine them moving him at the trading deadline because he's back to pitching the way he did. He's not throwing 100, on purpose, he said. He's throwing 96, 97, but his ball still has so much movement that he's pitching extremely well. But Nathan Eovaldi also, I think, is up there among the league leaders in ERA. He's pitching extremely well. So if they want to have a little fire sale um, at the deadline, they're going to be teams that'll line. It'll have to be teams that can afford to inherit DeGrom's contract. Go ahead.
The Yankees. They
Yankees.
could use they could use another starter.
Yankees,
Imagine next
Cubs.
year.
Yeah,
Imagine the
yeah,
rotation with Cole, DeGrom, Fried,
yeah,
Rodon.
yeah,
No one's stopping
yeah.
that.
Yeah, so watch Texas closely here. I'm not sure what's really happened with them. They've when they won the championship a few years back, it was because they had that great combination of veterans, right, as well as a lot of young guys, and the young guys haven't panned out now in their second and third years, and so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. All right, we are at that point, Ken. And we're at that point that I spent so much time on Thibodeau that I honestly didn't have any inspiration this week. And I think this is the first time I think in the 4 or 5 years or so that we've been doing the show that I didn't do my research. I'm sure there's some things that inspired me, but I don't have anything on the top of my head this week. What say you?
Well, I'd kind of hinted at a Jets thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so and it's funny because I saw it first as a meme, and then I looked into it. I was like, oh, interesting. Um, because I think a big part of any team's success or failures is their culture. Um, like we look at Ohio State, like their culture was a big part of why I think they won the title.
No doubt.
Um, and so I saw this as a joke because they said only not even God could save the Jets, but something that has been implemented to the Jets practices has been Bible study.
Oh,
Aaron Glenn has implemented just like, and someone had shared just like a thing where it's like basically like a devotional where they're looking at a scripture and answering some questions.
yeah.
So like, do I think that God looks at that and is like, oh yeah, the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl? I don't know, maybe. I know you would love that. But
Yes.
I think more importantly, um, because obviously, like if you're, I saw it on social media and there's a lot of people criticizing it. I think that Aaron Glenn sees himself more as a pastor to these young men as opposed to a head coach first.
Yeah.
Like I think he would I don't know. I don't know him that well, but I think he would be okay with losing his job over this as opposed to just eliminating it as a part of it. And like he doesn't know how long he's gonna have these guys for, whether it's a year, whether it's 5 years. He doesn't know how long he's gonna be there. But while he's there, he's gonna make sure that he's setting the tone. So just something to look out for. Even if it's
Yes.
like just a culture change. And maybe this is just kind of my speculation. Maybe that's part of the reason why he didn't want Aaron Rodgers there. But
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I did not know this. I didn't hear about this. This is great. I I've always found it intriguing that football, I think, is the only sport where every team has a chaplain. And maybe it's because they've always played on Sundays, and so thus that prevents all the players, most of them, from going to church. Maybe there's some players that go to a very early morning Sunday service. But you don't hear that there's a chaplain on the Mets or on the Yankees, or in the NBA. I'm sure there's some teams that probably have. The famous pastor that's down in Texas, I know, was the chaplain not only for the Cowboys. His name is escaping me too. He looks like Steve Harvey, and but and we did Tony Evans. Um, and he was also a chaplain for the Dallas Mavericks for several years. But that is great. That is great to hear about Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn is definitely a leader of men, and I'm glad he's taking that tack. And when you mentioned that he's more of a pastor to those young men, I thought about Tony Dungy and all the success he had, and that's exactly Joe Gibbs also was another one who both really were in that vein. Oh, that's an awesome story. I got to go look that up and tear it apart a little bit. All
yeah,
right. I am sure we have a lot to talk about next week. Maybe we'll have some candidates come a little bit more into focus. Maybe the Knicks will hire somebody between now and next week. Certainly baseball, certainly the NBA Finals, the NHL Final. Um, so lots to talk about next week. In the time being, Kenny, go ahead and take us home.
all right. This is Kenny Squared End
Kenny,
with Sports on the Positive Tip. We'll see you guys next week.
absolutely.